Now, the World Bank is warning that inflation in Ghana and three other African countries could go up significantly by the end of the year. The Bretton Woods Institution, in its latest Africa Pulse report, said inflation will go up by about 10% from what was recorded in 2022. Ghana ended last year with an inflation of about 54.1%. The projection is therefore sending disturbing signals to the country. This is despite inflation falling to 40.1% in the month of August. Now, meanwhile, the World Bank chief economist for Africa, Andrew Debalin, says the outlook of inflation and growth is not good for the region.
Economic activity in Africa continues to be subdued. Growth this year will be 2.5% compared to 3.6% last year. So that has declined. Now, but if you think about the reason why that is the case is because a lot of large economies in Africa are underperforming. We still have lots of conflict and violence that has actually ratcheted up. And finally, we also have this global economy that continues to hang over the continent's recovery. Now, 2.5 is low, but it's still positive. However, if you basically account for population growth, which is also around 2.5, effectively that means GDP per capita growth in Africa has been 0 this year. Now, this is not, this is actually the 9th year in which African GDP per capita growth has hovered around 0%. So in a way, the continent has lost an entire decade. In addition to that, debt levels continue to be really high. And that has really put a lot of damper on how the countries can mobilize resources in order to invest in, core development like, education, health, water systems, infrastructure, and so on and so on, right? So that has been, in fact, more than half of the countries are now considered to be either in debt distress or in high risk of debt distress, which means that if a small shock hits them, they're likely to run into a real financial crisis. Another bright spot is on inflation, right? So the median inflation, which is higher inflation, has actually declined from about 9.3% last year to 7.3% this year.
A visiting International Monetary Fund team is wrapping up its review of Ghana's program and Article 4 consultation this week. The team has been in the country for the past 2 weeks assessing the economy. George Wiafe has more.
The visit by the IMF is not only about tracking Ghana's first review under the IMF program, but also to undertake what is called Article 4 consultation. This is more of an assessment of Ghana's economy as well as future threats. Now, on the IMF program, Joy Business is learning that Ghana has passed most of the targets set under the program. One can talk about the qualitative and the quantitative targets. We also understand that the June and the September ending fiscal targets have been met by government. However, there are some issues with the energy sector restructuring when it comes to payments of arrears and some reforms that should be undertaken by government. Sources say this might not be that significant enough to affect government chances of passing this review. The team is expected to end the exercise possibly today with a release or some media engagement. From here, the IMF team is expected to put together its report and forward it to the IMF board for consideration. If the IMF board passes the staff report, it will then go ahead to approve some $600 million to be disbursed to Ghana before the end of November 2023. Well, we'll all be waiting for this final report that the visiting IMF staff team will put together about Ghana, as well as the assessment of the current state of the economy.
Now, to help us understand the impact of these issues on the economy is Professor Ejapoma Jeche Dako of the University of Ghana Business School. She is an economist. Grateful to you for joining us here. Now, worried about the World Bank's projection of inflation outlook despite the rate of inflation slowing?
Good afternoon to your listeners. Can you hear me, please? Good afternoon to your listeners.
We can hear you.
Well, I am not so worried with the outlook on inflation, to be specific, because we see that if we're comparing this year to last year, we can see that one of the things that actually caused our inflation to soar had to do with the stability in our currency. Our currency was quite unstable. And this year we are seeing a bit of stability in there, and therefore we expect that that would feed into lower imported inflation, and that obviously would feed into the inflation that we would be experiencing. If you take a look at the posture of the Central Bank of Ghana, last month when they went for their MPC meeting, you saw that they are beginning to take a more accommodative posture towards growth. And since their analysis is usually a forward-looking one, you envisage that their expectations about inflation is getting milder. So I'm not really worried about the outlook of World Bank as far as inflation is concerned. The only thing that would sway us off the gear may be if an unexpected fiscal measure is introduced.
Okay.
Like what we saw somewhere in July. In July, we saw some disinflation. In June, thereabouts, we began to see some disinflation, and all of a sudden, we saw that measures in taxes were introduced, and those sort of threw off the projections that the Bank of Ghana probably may have done, and that caused inflation to soar again. So I'm not really worried about the outlook.
Now, the bank is also projecting a 1.5% growth rate by end of year. But the Bank of Ghana governor thinks otherwise. He's arguing that GDP growth will reach over 3% by end of December. What do you make of it?
Well, I can't say for sure that it's going to be reaching about 3%, but I think what I can say is that we are going to be doing better than the 1.5% that is being, projected by the World Bank. And my reasons would obviously boil down to what I just spoke to you about inflation. Because inflation was soaring, because we're seeing increases in the rate of inflation, obviously the Bank of Ghana also took a certain posture where they were more restrictive, right, than expansionary. So for a few months now, from the beginning of the year, they have been more restrictive in their posture, increasing the monetary policy rate to ensure that we tighten up.
Okay.
And obviously, if they are expecting, and I'm sure this is why Governor Addison is making the projections that he's making, that if he's expecting inflation not to go out of gear, then their posture towards towards monetary policy is going to be more expansionary. And we've seen that the restrictive policy that was being taken obviously would have affected businesses. Investments would have been affected, that would have dampened consumption as well, and then growth, etc., would have been stifled. But given that they are being more accommodative towards growth now because of their expectations of inflation, I believe that is the basis for which he's saying that he expects growth to go up. Because if they take an accommodative posture, I don't want to use the word expansionary, but an accommodative posture, investment is going to be boosted, consumption is going to be increasing, and that would feed into the growth outlook that we are expecting.
Again, as a country,
secondly, we are also just a quick one. We are also, one thing that we should also bear in mind is that global outlook also influences what we do over here, and the global outlook is becoming more friendly. We've seen many of the countries like the US and the UK also watching the hikes in the policy rates, and that obviously is going to be influencing what we do over here, because once they have hikes in their policy rates, we are also in a way being forced to hike our rates. And so if they are taming down on the hikes, obviously we are also going to be taming down, and then investment, we expect investment and consumption to also rise to boost demand and then our output. So I expect us to do better than the 1.5, obviously.
If you can do this for me in a minute, I'll be happy. What must we do to insulate ourselves from these perennial economic shocks that we do, witness year in, year out?
Well, we have, I think, day in and day out, we keep paying lip service, let me put it that way, to what we need to do. We know what we need to do. We know that our structure, the structure of our economy itself has, issues, and we haven't over the years, and if I say over the years, right from independence till date, we haven't been able to build that kind of resilience in our economy that we need to be building to make sure that we are withstanding shocks. We have basically being an import-driven country. Thankfully, we've managed to get oil that is helping us, but the sort of agreements that we go into for our resources also don't help. We have limited ourselves to the primary goods that we have known since Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's time. We have not really thought about how we can, or we have thought about how we can diversify the economy, but we have not really put in real measures that would actually let us, implemented the measures that would let us move into the direction that would make us self-reliant. So I think that we need to be focusing greatly on how to become self-reliant as a country. We produce what we eat. And also, we need to be thinking about our expenditure, making sure that we are not going beyond what we are supposed to be going, be aggressive with our revenue mobilization. We say it all this time. The measures are there, but we have not really been aggressive. We should be more efficient in the collection of our taxes so that we can spend what we are actually mobilizing.
Okay.
Yes.
Prof, I'm grateful to you for joining us here. Professor Ejapoma Jekedako is an economist with the University of Ghana.
Now, some oil marketing companies have increased prices of petroleum products at the pumps. The review Joy Business is Learning was carried out on Tuesday, October 3rd, 2023. Shell is selling a liter of petrol at 13 cedis 49 pesos. Diesel, on the other hand, is going for 13 cedis 95 pesos. Another major player, Star Oil, is selling a liter of petrol at 11 cedis 99 pesos, while diesel is going for 13 cedis 39 pesos. Meanwhile, some OMCs are still yet to adjust prices of fuel at the pumps.
In other stories, the Junior Staff Association of the Tema Oil Refinery has demonstrated against the Tor and Torrentco deal, calling for the board of the refinery to be dissolved. The association is accusing the board and management of acting not in the interest of the refinery. Let's go on Zoom and speak to Executive Director of the Institute of Energy Affairs, Nana Mwesi the 7th. Nana, grateful to you for joining us here. First of all, do you think Tema Oil Refinery and Torrentco partnership will help solve the TOR's fundamental issues?
Okay, so the name is Institute for Energy Security, not the Institute for Energy Affairs.
Thanks for the correction.
Point of correction.
Thanks for correction, sir.
Okay, come again with a question, please.
So I was asking of what you do make of this partnership between TOR and Torrentco, and whether this will help solve TOR's fundamental issues.
Well, for many years, the IES has been pushing for private sector involvement in the operations of TOR, and for 2 or 3 reasons. One, we have very bad books for TOR. It means that TOR cannot borrow on its own books and cannot really venture into any capital-intensive business. They are unable to buy crude, and if you understand, even basic obligation of paying electrical bills and water has been a challenge. And so the private sector involvement will be able to inject some capital to ensure that key components of the refinery are brought to standards and for an efficient operation. It will also help to procure crude as well. aside the capital injection, you also want to believe that the private sector brings in some level of efficiency. Currently at all, and for many years, political interference has been one of their challenge, because you don't seem to get the right people at the helm of affairs. The private sector can introduce that kind of competence and efficiency in their program. And so we are for private sector participation in the business of toll, not necessarily government holding 100% equity in a business that yields negative return. But
the staff are alleging that this deal is not in the interest of TOR. How do we go about, yes, we need private sector to participate, but that participation should inure to the benefit of the entity?
Is that the case? That's the point I was getting to, that yes, private sector participation is okay. However, it depends on who is partnering TOR and what the person brings on board. Will there be value for money? And for this deal, it's always go and hit a snag, because it has failed to garner that type of staff support, and also the staff complain that it is not transparent in its current stage, and so they want to be brought on board to understand the technical and economic dimension of this. If that is done, I'm sure it could pass. But for now, the IES cannot, say that the Terenco deal is the best, because it changes in forms, it changes in shapes every passing month. Until we see the final document, we cannot say it is the best.
But with the senior staff back in the deal, what do you think must be the way forward?
Well, it's just a section of the senior staff that are back in the deal. If you go into TOR, there are two key unions. The Chemical Workers Union have one, then of course the UNICOF also on another side. If you count the number, you will have more than 60% of the staff on the side of the Chemical Workers Union, as against the UNICOF. And even within the UNICOF, it's the leadership, as we understand, that is, for the deal. A deal that we don't have, the full handle on as to the detail in it. And the devil is always in the detail.
Okay.
And so it's a section of the staff that is back in it, not the entire staff as we get it.
Okay. Grateful to you, Nana, for joining us here. He is
Thanks for having me.
Executive Director of the Institute for Energy Security.
Now, the Ghana Institution of Engineering has reiterated its commitment to promote and advance the training and practice of engineering for social good. President of the institution, Engineer Kwabena Bimpon, said his outfit is seeking to partner other organizations to help create opportunities in traditional areas. He spoke to Joy Business and the signing of a memorandum of understanding between his outfit and the paramount chief of Asing Oyerenchi traditional area, Nana Pra Ajasim the Sixth.
The signing of the MOU between the institution and the paramount chief of Asing Oyerenchi Traditional Council is to complement the efforts of Enwunabubri Pra Ajasim the Sixth to the development of the community into a historical and eco-friendly tourist attraction in the central region. President of the Ghana Institution of Engineering, Engineer Kwabena Bimpon, said the institution is excited to providing its expertise and knowledge in ensuring that the vision of the community is achieved.
We want to have an engineer innovation center. I had so many things, they were easy. And but like architects do, they take all that we are dreamers. When you, as a client, you become a dreamer. You dream so many. Some of the things are probably you end up building in the sky. You build castles or skyscrapers in the sky, but they will try and bring you down to earth. And that is where he developed a design brief. And with the design brief, I shared with my council. Well, at the time, I was not yet the president, but then I shared with the president, Engineer Professor Charles Anumadams, that this is what I would like to do in the future.
On this part, the paramount chief of Asing Oyerenchi Traditional Council, Enwunabubri Pra Ajasim the Sixth, said the partnership has been established to making the vision for his community come through.
And I'm very impressed. I nearly lost hope this country because I made the mistake of following and having confidence in politicians until I met you guys. Every multimillionaire civilized man or woman has a country home. Everyone. Because there is something outside the city that is good for the brain.
The EV will not only attract tourists, but also create employment opportunities, for which will contribute to economic growth for the area.
That's how we wrap up today's edition of The Marketplace. My name is Emma Davis.
And I'm Samuel Kojo Brace. There's more on myjoyonline.com/business. Enjoy your day. Good afternoon.